welcome to First Congregational Church in Guilford, Connecticut. Except today I'm not in Guilford. I am looking at downtown Birmingham. Next year for our Civil Rights History trip, we will be once again going to Birmingham, to Montgomery, and to Selma. This trip is open for everyone, and I hope you can start planning to go with us. Meanwhile, we have a list of books that are coming out in the Inspire for you to read to help us talk about the Civil Rights History movement and currently how we're doing in our time and our culture and working for equity. Now this day as you join for worship, I invite you to take a moment to find a more quiet space, to be still, to roll your shoulders back, open hands and hearts and minds. Breathe in the breath of God, breathe out the love of God. Continue praying for individual hearts, for the community, and for our wider world. Let us continue now hearing the scripture for the morning.
Gospel reading from the book of Mark. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of Jesus, for they said, "He is out of his mind." And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, "He is possessed by Beelzebub. By the prince of demons, he is driving out demons."
So Jesus called them over and began to speak to them in parables. How can evil drive out evil? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if evil opposes itself and is divided, it cannot stand, and an end has come. In fact, no one can enter a strong person's house without first tying them up. Then that one can plunder the strong person's house. Truly, I tell you, people can be forgiven all their sins and every slander they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. They are guilty of an eternal sin.
Jesus said this because they were saying, "He has an impure spirit." Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him and said, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you."
Who are my mother and my siblings? Jesus inquired. Then Jesus looked at those seated in a circle and said, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever follows God is my sibling and my mother."
May we be granted wisdom and understanding to this text.
Today I am here with Reverend Heather, who pastors at North Madison. And you know, I'm at First Church in Guilford, and we are actually in First Madison as we're recording today because we have a clergy council meeting. And thought it would be interesting to have a conversation about the third chapter of the Gospel of Mark. It's a fascinating chapter. It's quite long. You just heard it, 20 through 35. And the thing that strikes me about it over and over again has to do with two words I say most often: complicated and complex.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the ideas around family. And you know, we talk about family as family of origin, adopted family, your birth family, and your chosen family. Those are some of the things that are pretty regular in conversation. So Heather, when you look at this passage, what jumps out? What leaps out at you?
Well, actually, I hadn't thought of this when we were talking a moment ago, but it's Pride Month.
Yes.
And so this, question of family of choice and family of origin is really important.
It's huge.
And when we see Jesus here, I think we think of Jesus sometimes as, or we were raised to think of Jesus as living in this idyllic situation, right? That Mary, who, has no sin, and Joseph, who's so generous, although he disappears at some point, and Jesus, who, is the model son. He's the Son of God, right? He's the Messiah. But in these stories, we see the complexity, behind all of the mythological stories that we've adopted. And so in here, when I read this, I see really real tension between a young man who's come to adulthood, and his family, as he's stepping forward into what feeds his heart and the gospel he's trying to preach. And now his family's embarrassed. His mom's embarrassed. And, a Jewish mom, they're embarrassed. They're going to come for you. And so, like a good Jewish mom, she gets all his siblings and comes to storm the buildings. And
He's out of his mind.
He's out of his mind. He's out of his mind. Don't listen to him. We're taking him home. Don't worry. So, yeah.
Well, you're raising the idea of boundaries too. So that's another level, because you think about when Jesus is surrounded by people, and he's like, everybody, I've got to get in this boat, and I'm going over here for a little bit to reset, to collect myself. So I wonder, as we grow up, and this is also graduation Sunday, celebration of graduation Sunday at First Church, how do we find family, and how do we make our family unit expand? Because we're grateful from where we come, things we learn and things we want to not take with us. And so we choose as we move forward. So like we talk about in premarital.
Yes.
So here we are. Now, what do you keep from your family of origin, and how do you want to do your marriage and traditions differently?
And how do you center yourself in a way that isn't selfish, but is self-informed?
And self-fulfilling.
And self-fulfilling and authentic, right? Little kids, we learn to give up authenticity for attachment, right? I need to attach to these parents and these siblings and this extended family to keep me alive, teach me the ways of the world, and then I come to adulthood, and now I have to discern what do I keep of this, and where do I go? And I think we see Jesus doing that, moving into this place of family of choice, not because he doesn't love his family, but because he sees a different truth that he has to be true to. And I think that's where we go with this whole question about the Spirit. What is it if we speak against the Spirit? Well, where does the Spirit live? It's in our hearts, and we each experience it differently.
So inauthenticity causes separation from the Spirit. And we sometimes place that upon people because we want them to be who they are. I know, like with some of the foster children that Milton and I have had lived with us, and we're trying to think of a different name than foster children, but those with lived foster experience. Part of the problem was their one's adoptive parents or birth parents didn't like who they became. And so, how heartbreaking for the child not to feel blessed and loved. And then even with Jesus, I do feel sorry for Mary in this passage.
She's doing her best.
She's doing her best.
Like every mom everywhere, we're doing our best.
And there's got to be a little bit like, hey, Jesus, I'm your mom. I need some recognition over here. And he's like, who is my mother? Who are my siblings? So it's complex. It's layered. Family life is layered.
Well, and Jesus is evolving too. It's something for a parent that's hard, and for the adult child that's hard. Because we remember Jesus' first miracle, Mary sets him up at the wedding and says, go do this, and he does what his mom tells him to do. And now he's off doing something, and mom's like, whoa, wait a minute. And he's like, you know what, Mom, I have a bigger truth here. They do come back together, spoiler alert, they do come back together in the end. And that's, we're all, if we judge our relationships by any one moment, right? You can win the battle and lose the war. And this is about that freedom that has to come as you trust an adult into adulthood, and as you yourself continue to evolve as a child of God, which we do throughout our lives. We take pieces and reject pieces over and over, and then we circle back, right? How many times as a kid you're like, oh, my parents are idiots. And then you get to be a parent or get older and you're like, oh, maybe you did have. And, and we see that too. Jesus comes back to Mary's original prayer, like, let it be with me as you have said. Mary prayed. And then on the cross we see Jesus pray. So he does come back around, and she does find a way to let her son have the freedom he needs, which is kind of amazing.
In something that you said, it made me think about my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law. They were great at being little kid parents, and they are great at being adult parents.
But that adolescent period.
No, they did that well too. I've never seen that quite like they did it.
That's amazing.
I think they both took their own histories and decided how they would be with their kids along the way, which makes me think about how God watches each of our stages of life. And we talk about the abundance of grace that God has for us, because God is looking at us from, bless their hearts. You know, God has a southern moment, and they're saying they're in the developmental stages, right? You know, they're trying to figure their way out in the world, and our faith plays out like that, like it does here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's real. Well, and then, you know, we come to this passage about, you know, if a house is divided against itself, how does it stand? And I think it can feel like when people around you are changing or going in a direction that isn't the direction that was right for you, it can feel like the house is dividing against itself. And you worry, oh my gosh, am I losing my child? Am I losing my parent? Am I losing
a friend?
A friend. Yeah. So many relationships.
Yes.
And love, right? Love needs a spaciousness to really do what it can do, right? As a technology, love needs to have the freedom to go where it's going to go. And so it's a gift, really, to be close to someone who's changing, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like the house is coming apart.
It's a little scary. It's like church changing too, you know, pre-COVID, post-COVID, pre-1970, post-2020. And it makes us a little unsettled.
Yeah.
So there's a word we all need to learn and practice. I'm going to invite you to look it up and to study it, pray about it, and stay with it.
Oh, I'm looking forward to the word.
Differentiation.
Oh, that's a good word.
So to be self-differentiated with someone is to empower them to be themselves, to be authentically themselves, to maintain the relationship, and to celebrate who they are. So I officiated a wedding this past weekend. I found myself in the most interesting situation. I was in Alabama, and I was in this lovely setting of this really kind man who we were completely opposite politically. We were completely opposite in our jobs. I pastor a church, and he owns a gun shop.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And he was the most wonderful human being. And he would truly be in a collective of people who follow Christ. And I had to really check myself.
What do I do with this?
And my own ability to put us each in boxes. And it was wonderful. It made me think about Jay Baker. I don't know if you saw the interview he did with another UCC minister. Jay was talking about his parents were famous televangelists, not great, famous and infamous, I suppose you would say, his dad anyway. But he said he felt pressure from his progressive colleagues to denounce his father. And he kept saying, but he's my father, and I don't agree with him. And he felt pressure from his conservative evangelical colleagues to say, no, all the progressive theology isn't accurate. And he said, no, I believe in this theology, and I love you. And he really did an incredibly Christ-like thing, talking about how you hold people that you are completely opposite with, that you disagree with. How do you let Christ help you find family?
That's lovely. And you know, what you're saying about the man you ran into at the wedding, and you know, you felt a sort of connection to him, an affection, and what do I do with this? I'm beginning to believe more and more that, as we see in Jesus' stories, each person he encounters gives him a different opportunity to practice love, and teaches us as the witnesses, the listener. You know, it gives us the opportunity to think about the people we encounter and what we do with it. And the one in my life that I think of often, I can't remember his name, but there's a guy, he's African American, and you've probably read the book, there's a book he's written about, he encounters people who are in the KKK. And it started with a Grand Master who he says, I have a white sounding voice, and he had a name that worked, and so he asked for an interview with this guy, and he got it, and he went to his hotel room, a black man alone in the midst of the KKK, and what he did was sit down and love the guy. He asked him questions with an authentic heart, with openness, and this great higher up in the KKK eventually had this man at his daughter's wedding and gave up his robes, and now this man has continued and had many conversations where he shows up to connect with the human in the other person.
Right.
And that causes someone, when they feel so deeply heard and loved, to let down their guard. And then we're not, you're crazy, like these two.
Yes.
Right? Who's my mother then? I'm not sure this is Jesus' finest moment. I think Jesus is a little, triggered here. I want my mom to be proud of me. I think he's feeling a little triggered. But when we can really settle ourselves down, come from an authentic place, find what we connect with in the other, it's amazing what love can do. That's where I think really love does become a technology.
Absolutely. And so the song that we will hear later today and the in-person service, differently abled, differently labeled, widen the circle around Jesus Christ. Then it continues, love will relate us, and family failings and human derailings all are accepted around Jesus Christ. May it be so.
May it be so.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. It was lovely.
Take care. Peace be with you all.
Who is my mother? Who is my brother? All those who gather around Jesus Christ. Spirit-blown people, born from the gospel, sit at the table round Jesus Christ. Differently abled, differently labeled, widen the circle round Jesus Christ. Crutches or stigmas, cultural enigmas, all come together round Jesus Christ. Love will relate us, color or status can't segregate us round Jesus Christ. Family failings, human derailings, all are accepted round Jesus Christ. Bound by one vision, met for one mission, we claim each other round Jesus Christ. Here is my mother, here is my brother, kindred in spirit through Jesus Christ.